quickly here to Tim. Tim Pelton, he was actually a graduate of the program here. He's an associate professor of mathematics education at the University of Victoria. So our neighbors to the north here, we're still friendly. He teaches courses on mathematics pedagogy for pre-service teachers at the elementary school level, as well as courses on educational technology. Right now he's focusing on supporting learning in mathematics through differentiated activities, problem-based learning, integration of new technologies in the teaching of mathematics and science, and applying mathematics, technology, and measurement to solve real-world problems. Tim and his wife and colleague, Leslie Francis Pelton, are both IP&T alumni, and they've been involved in the design and development of iOS apps as of late to support students in exploring mathematics and science concepts and in constructing their own understanding of these topics. And so he's going to talk to us today about that process in creating iOS apps. Without any further ado, if you have any questions, raise your hand as you go through. Tim wanted to be able to see you all, so you can raise your hand over here. What I've also done, now that the lights are off, you probably can't see that. If you'd like to participate online, you can come in as a guest. The site is connect.byu.edu/Pelton, and just sign in as a guest. There's a little chat window down to the bottom left-hand corner if you'd like to participate that way. So, without any further ado, Tim, I'm going to unlink the screen and turn it over to you. Go ahead. Oh, you know what? We can't hardly hear you now. Hold on. Okay, the speaker's coming on. Go ahead and speak.
Here, I'm going to have to take off my headphones because we're coming back 2 seconds later. So you can send me a chat message if you need to contact me. Okay. Well, I wish I was closer so I could see your faces, because it's always much easier to present to people when you can see them in person. I graduated from BYU about 2002, so we're talking 9 years ago. Turned off your microphone so I can... Okay. I'm going to tell you about some of our work that we've been doing with designing iOS apps to support learning in mathematics and in science and in other areas as well. We're not looking at it in isolation all the time, but we're looking to engage students in make effective use of the newer technology. A little bit of an outline. We're going to talk about some of the reasons we chose to work with iOS technologies. iOS meaning iPod touches, iPhones, and iPads. We're going to look at some existing math apps. There's about 3,000 if you do a search on the iTunes store. You'll find that most of them are weak or heavy flashcard applications. We're looking for applications that we could recommend to our students and recommend to parents. Found a few, and we'll share some of those. We'll talk about our design principles that we've come up with as we've worked on developing these apps. They're still in development, and we're still looking at what works best. We're just getting to the point of validating some of our software. That'll be happening this spring to confirm our implicit hypotheses that our approach will have a positive effect on learning. Hopefully I'll be able to show you maybe a little video clip or two, but we'll see how the time goes. Or if you can tell me what time you want me to stop talking and take questions in the chat box, that'd be great. Okay, so why are we here? We're looking at these iOS devices, and we're finding them to be a very low friction and low threshold. Low threshold meaning it doesn't take much effort on the part of the teacher or the parent or the child to access the application and to make use of it. Low friction means it doesn't take much to continue to make use of it. Has figured out how to use it in a classroom and making use of it doesn't take an extra time allotment for them to manage it. Talking about the direct interaction, the touch screen is an incredibly intuitive device for interacting with a lot of different models, actually engaging. And so we're looking at those things and saying, gee, these really do make it have a great potential. Anybody who has an iPhone or an iPod Touch and a child knows how quickly the child asks they're asked to have the iPod passed over. Can I play with your iPhone? Can I, wherever they are, whether it happens to be in a lineup in a movie or a restaurant or so we're transferring. We're also looking at transferring best practices in math courses to pre-service teachers. For 7 years now, it's my 8th year, and found that there's some logical approaches that we're taking in the classroom. We're talking about how we might help students to make sense of things, and how we might want to use. We want to use concrete materials. We want to use visual materials, and we want to avoid leaping to the symbols. And, we want to support them with models. We want to support them with something that focus on helping the students understand the concepts first. There's been some research that has demonstrated that if students are presented with procedures before they're presented with concepts, then they're less likely to tend to the lessons on the concepts. They don't want to bother learning it. They say, hey, I already know how to do it, so why would I want to spend my time on this? And so we want to emphasize conceptual mastery first. And we want to support also the development of procedural mastery and fluency. Accuracy first, then fluency. We always emphasize the accuracy first, because the accuracy, if we push them with a time limit and a timer moving along on the face of the screen, it's distressing, it's increasing anxiety, it's reducing the efficacy of the application. We're also looking to reduce classroom load, because there's some of these apps that can allow a student to, after the teacher introduces them and works with the class as a whole or with small groups, to help them to understand what's going on and to make sense of it. And then the students can go off and work on activity centers, and this can be part of that process. It doesn't have to be, we're not intending to replace anything, we're simply supplementing or augmenting. Apps can be self-paced and individual, but they can also be supporting collaborative practice. And they also support the idea of sending home a list of apps to a parent saying, hey, if your child's struggling in this, you might look at these apps. They're covering the topics that we're trying to cover this year in school, and they've got that. And with the parents, if you talk about the parents dragging a parent up to, or a parent dragging a child up to the computer screen and spending an hour, it happens sometimes, but it's one of those things that doesn't happen a lot, and kids are often reluctant to spend a long time in a tutoring mode with a parent. And so if we can shorten it and make it rich, maybe a 1 or 2 minute micro tutoring activity, that there's a sharing of understanding and exploration, and then the child can go off and work and then come back and go back and forth, I think that'll be more effective. We've came up with a motto of play, explore, and understand. The idea is we want to provide the model for the student to look at make sense of and build confidence, and they explore that and they discover relationships and they discover strategies either in collaboration with a parent or tutor or teacher, students, and then they understand the concepts and master those concepts and pursuit. Sample apps that I'm going to show you, these are primarily elementary and middle school focused. I've avoided the flashcard apps. There's lots of them out there. Lots of people who are good programmers, obviously, and some who are not, have gone in and created these apps to support a child or a niece or a nephew or a friend or something. Flashcards, I have limited interest in. We're also looking at skipping step-by-step and procedure manuals. There are some that that will just show you how to do things, and step-by-step symbolic manipulation. That's not what we're. Others that are talking about math tricks, and we're not interested in those. So, but of the apps I'm showing you, none of them are perfect, but they're representing the best of what we can see out there. 1,000 out there of apps. If you type in math under the iTunes store, they see about 3,000 apps pop up on the 300,000 apps or so. Not an exhaustive list that I'm presenting to you today. Here's one that's an app that I've used with preschool kids just to help them to build a sense of awareness of shape and geometry, and as I look at the aspects of this, and they drag as they drag the pieces
go down to YouTube, so it's his
over into the slots, they discover the attributes that are important to consider and pay attention. They complete the picture, and they get a reward of a picture appearing. And the kids, 3 and 4-year-old kids, even 2-year-old kids can master this, and building their awareness of it. Here's another one that's intended for the preschool level. We're talking here about basic things like addition and counting, and they're representing these counts in terms of moving objects. And here they're representing the combining of two sets, a 3 and a 2, and you're trying to come back together to figure. It'll animate it, so if you tap on it, it'll animate these two birds coming up and joining. Some sense of what's going on. It's consistent with Carpenter's and Venema's CGI. Here's another one that's just a very basic application that allows them to play with blocks and count up the blocks automatically. So as they're working through, they just click on these block stacks of different amounts, and it adds on, and it can add on all the way up to much larger numbers if they need to. They just shrink down. And the play is very intuitive. You just double click on things and drag them, and it works automatically. You don't have to think about how it's going to work. It starts working as soon as you press things and you recognize. This is just a 100 chart. It's again, this one is not actually there's no challenge particularly given here. It's just a tool that can be used in the classroom by a teacher or with a parent. Patterns and numbers. Here's another one, and this is a basic coin counting game. There's no animation going on here, no manipulation. All you're doing is selecting the sum that you think those coins add up to. I haven't seen any really good coin ones yet, but we're working on one, and I'm sure there's lots of other ones coming out eventually. Another one. This is one of the ones that's closer to a flashcard, but it's got the model in here. It's the important. That's the important part that we're looking for. And in fact, they have 4 different models that they present that you can swipe and go through. And so this is actually probably one of the closest to what we're looking at as we want to provide the questions, but we also want to provide the visual model to help the students. Talk about here 7 and move right to by 4 to get to 11. It helps them to figure out what's. This is a very basic, this is sort of step-by-step, and it's very symbolic oriented. I put it in here because it does have some value. It's if you're trying to learn the procedures, column subtraction, this could be a tool that could support that. And they've got, the author for this has created several similar kinds of applications. Just that they do products multiplication, I think they've gone on and done that. One is just to find the missing element theories, and again, this one is an example that doesn't have a model, and I like it because it by the time the student is at this level, they're able to manage without the model so much. That I saw out there that could do this for them. Another one, again, not much of a model. That there's a number line model down below, but they don't implement it fully, so that the relative position of these circles on the line has no meaning other than order. So if it's out of order, it's highlighted, but if it's in order, the position on the line doesn't matter. 5%, sir. This is one. There's another group that was working on building models and helping students to make sense. Interacted with them sometime at here, and they've created this application, and they're providing more of a game than we've done, and so I appreciate their efforts to provide some context that's perhaps more interesting to the students. Emphasized, and we haven't emphasized much with the contextual fluff, if you will, but at the same time it's engaging, so it's worthwhile. And so we're still debating on that one as to how much extra information whether it be distracting or whether it be helpful for more. So this is a problem-solving kind of application. You're looking for two numbers that add together to give you a sum and a product. And so here we're looking for two numbers that add together to 5 and multiply together to give 6. So we put in 2 there and put in the one. Again, it's all symbolic. There's no model here. It's a puzzle type of activity, and it supports the students who are ready to go on to build the fluency. But I wouldn't put them into this until they have fully mastered the operations, and then they can work on several different levels of games here where they're looking to find 39. So in this case, they have to find two numbers that they. Same sort of thing here. They're looking for 78, and they've got a scan over here. So they're doing mental math and efficiently trying to sort out looked at this. I don't know if I'm still being bumped out, but I haven't got anything running. Probably I was busy grinding through this application is just a series of challenges and supporting the idea of mental math. Another one, again, supporting mental math and problem solving. The goal here is to move numbers into these squares so that all of these marginal values are correct. And several different levels, and it's quite engaging. The one you're working with the playing a game where you're trying to knock out all of the different values across the screen as they roll the dice, and there's some logic here. This would support a lab lesson in a classroom where they would discover that there is a strategy that might be more effective. That if they ever get a 7, 8, or 9, the opportunity to get that, they should take it, because those come out infrequently, whereas the 2, 3, 4, 5s come out much. Another one is a logic and thinking ahead and a reasoning type of application. It's, Fine Arts has one like this one as well. Dozen games like this one out there, and I think they're engaging and they're worthwhile and they're relevant to mathematics. Again, here's another one. You can set up puzzles with respect to these pentominoes, and they've got samples here, but you can use it to motivate a discussion on the topic. Now I'm going to move into some of the design principles that we have. So our design principles, we have 4 that I'm going to talk about. The first one is just keep it simple. As we look at these applications, it's a small screen that we're dealing with. It's student and go off and have them spend most of their time and effort playing the fun little activity on the side that doesn't lead you to necessarily the learning. So we're focusing on the one concept at a time. We're minimizing the threshold and the friction for both for the teacher or the parent. And interface that we've created, we've replicated many of the features from application to application to application, so that we aren't distracting them with having to figure out what's going on next, and as far as making the application work. Hoping, and we're thinking we're achieving tuition there. We want the students to we're focused on a single topic and a process at a time. Again, because we're talking about micro-tutoring here. We're talking about opportunities to work with a child on a topic that might only last a minute or 2, or maybe 5, but they're not going to be an hour-long lesson necessarily. It might be incorporated into that lesson by the teacher as a hook or an exploration. Not necessarily going to be the entire lesson. It's not necessarily going to be, and we don't know how long the time is. And especially with the mobile apps, you've got to get in and be able to. Sorry, I just read my. I'm not to use any nasty language. So we're focusing on a single topic, and that's our first principle. We want to make applications that will help us master a concept, and we're not trying to replace the teacher or parent or do everything for everyone. We're providing one tool that can be hopefully used by others and support. Second principle we have is provide a meaningful model or manipulative within the application. Each of our model that's there, we're hoping and expecting, and that we're going to be testing this, that it will support the student in making sense of the concept and perhaps even provide them with a foundational model in their mind for dealing with the concept. Same models that we present as for the exploration aspects. We usually have an exploration mechanism and then a challenge mechanism, which is a simple game. And then models are always available. We're always on the screen. Sometimes there's multiple models that they can scroll through. Sometimes there's options that they can adjust. But again, we're not putting on a lot of extraneous material on the screen because, again, that's a distraction and there's limited real estate. Supporting individual needs, again, we're looking at one-on-one tutoring, we're looking at exploration by individuals or with a pair, looking to help them to work at whatever level they're at and then progress in their mastery. We're emphasizing success. There's might be some, the feedback again is minimal, but there's some positive tones that come on as the less positive tone if they make an error, but it's there. The user can turn that on and off if they need to. They can adjust other things as they need to. our focus is always on emphasizing the concept first, and then the fluid. Usually a timer in behind, and there's usually some reporting of that to the user, to the player, to the parent. But the goal is to make sure that they're getting that in the information we provide to the parents as well. So we're supporting assessment by learners, self-assessment, assessment by parents, teachers. Self-assessment, the idea is the students should be able to know where they're at and where they're going. Parents need to also know where the students are at and what help they might need. They should be able to review what the student has been accomplishing over the time period. There's a mechanism to export that to by email to the teacher or to parents, so ledger or with a spreadsheet if they have that. Also a more comprehensive report on some of our applications that actually goes step by step, the time sequences and that sort of thing, to allow for researchers to examine those in finer detail. All of that is available to anybody who's using our app, so it's not just locked into us as researchers. We've made it available. It's part of the application, and any researcher can make use of it. Engaging a group of students or a group of and then having them volunteer to allow their data to be used and send it to those, and we're willing and happily encouraging other researchers to use. I'm going to show you a few of our applications just so that you have a flavor of them. They're all free. They're on the iTunes store. We've got 5 on the store right now, and we've got another 5 that are in various stages of development. We're trying to build a collection so that when a parent looks at it, tappers, if you just search for math tappers on iTunes, you'll find them. There's 5 of them out there now. So with Clockmaster, anyways, the example here, I've got a short little video. I don't know if I'll be able to share it with you. I'm going to try just for a second to see if it comes up, but we'll abandon it if it doesn't. So share my computer screen.
Signal past the Canadian border, the U.S.-Canadian border. It's problematic.
Yeah. The thing is, when you test these out ahead of time, they work perfectly. There's none of this jittery whatever stuff. Using the same computer. Someone on his end, you guys turn what saying. Can you see anything? Okay, here you go.
Don't know if it's coming through, and I've lost matters.
It's coming through, but now I can't.
Tiny little video here is called Intro Clockmaster, and I will go back. Tell me if you're receiving this. Volume high enough.
We can receive it, but we can't hear it. So if you want to narrate the video, then we maybe could hear it, have it follow a little bit better.
Okay. So you're not getting the audio coming through, I guess, because I got my headphones plugged in and I can hear it, but you can't. So what you're seeing here is just a Clockmaster application running. I'm running it on the iPad, so you can see how it's both the iPad and the iPods. You can adjust the digital clock or the analog clock. It's a straight link to it. The idea there is that we've got explorations with the child, and you're exploring how the minutes work and how the hour hand works. You can turn off the minute hand and then just have a broken clock. And then the student can explore the relationship between hours and the digital clock, and discuss how old clocks 500 years ago didn't have minute hands. Minute hands were just added as a precision tool. You can go into a challenge process where you're going to play the game, and you're challenged with a series of 10 different times to set. Here I'm going to set it just using the hour hand, and you can see it's very straightforward to set it with the hour hand. And again, many adults, if you ask them to represent time, fail to represent the hour hand correctly on the clock, because it's something they haven't mastered. It's something they haven't made sense of. So it's important that they have that full model there. Here again, I'm setting the time to 3:20. When you have it in the medium mode, it just jumps to the nearest 5 minutes. When you press the check button, it evaluates whether you've set your analog clock the same as your digital clock, and it gives you some points. If you miss it, you can tap on the screen. It shows you what you entered, and it shows you what should have been there, so that the information is consistent from the analog clock to the digital clock. You also have the opportunity to have the minute numbers on the bezel of the clock, so they can look at those if they need them. They can then take them away bit by bit. Work on discussing how each of the work. You can do it so you can set the digital clock as well. You can use it in the play mode as well to check what an analog clock is saying. So if they've got the application, they can look at an analog clock and set it to match what they see on the wall, and they can find the time if they don't know how to find the time yet. At the end, they're given a score at a time, and again, we're focusing always on improving that score up to a mastery level. Even 90% is something we're aiming for, and then focus on improving the time. We don't emphasize, and we encourage parents to focus on the mastery first. I'm going to stop it there. I think there's, well, maybe I'll point to here. I'll just drag it to the end. We do have a word clock, and so that there's, rather than a digital clock, you can talk about the words and learn the number of words associated with the time. Under settings, we also have opportunities to set to look at information for parents, set advice, also to get the reports back and the other information. So those resources are available. And again, we have a website, mathtappers.com. It's set up for the applications we've got out there, if you want to go there. Back to documents here. Rotten cold here. It's just hanging on. Okay, so Clockmasters is one of them. FindSums is another application we've created. Here you ask a young child to click on one of these buttons, and it presents the number of associated with that of apples up in the 10 frame. The child, this is a preschool child typically, or a kindergarten grade 1. They'll count them, and they say okay, and they're associating the number with the number of objects. And then you're asking to how many spaces are still available, and they can count those as well. And pretty soon they're starting to realize the counting process, and they're starting to find shortcuts that work for them. They've realized that 3 and 7 go together, and then they try 7 and 3 sometime, and they realize, oh, that works as well. There can be lots of different number sets they can be aiming for. We're focusing on 5s, 10s, but then you can also go to any number set, complementary pairs that add up. We also go up to 100 for building mental math skills and supporting that. As a student is clicking on one of these ones, they're thinking, what's the complement to that? What's the complement to 75? What's the complement to 84? If they have those complements ready, accessible in their mind, and they're able to deal with math problems without getting stuck on these minutiae. We have a part whole model as well. If they're a more advanced student and they're looking to just find the relationship between those number symbols. What you find is a student or child becomes proficient at any one of these levels, they stop looking at the model. Well, that's fine, but the model's there if they ever need it, and that's the goal, is to have a ready resource for them. Another one we have is for estimating fractions. A lot of kids get lost in learning as they are grade 6, as they start fractions. The symbols come fast and furious, and they don't make sense. And we had a student, Maggie Martinez, who went through it at the same time as I did, and she had her learning orientation theory, and she was talking about her reluctant learners. Well, I think in math education, the students who become reluctant are the ones who've given up on trying to make sense of the symbols because it just came too fast and it wasn't sensible to them. And so these ideas of here for estimate fractions, what we're looking at is building the fluency of making sense of what a fraction is. So if they see 4/5, they should be able to see it. Well, that's closer to 1 1/2. And if they understand that, that's great. If they don't, as they're dwelling with that thing and unsure about where it should be, the little pie graph will replace the fraction. So they'll look at it and say, oh, it is closer to 1 than 1/2. We can go on to sums as well, and they can be summing their estimates. So they can come up with an estimate of what a sum would be. Again, whenever you're working on a problem in mathematics, if you don't understand the problem well enough to have an estimate, you don't understand the problem. And so if we're looking at helping the students to be able to build their estimates efficiently and multiples, understanding multiplication basic facts, again, is an essential tool. We provide the context. Multiplication and division are shared as well as addition and subtraction back with fine sums. Here the idea is, if they press 3 times 4, they're looking for 12, and they can count it if they need to. If they press it the other way, if they say if they double tap on the screen, it reorients from the 9 sets of 7 to 7 sets of 9, so they've got the sets are in the language that we're using in the classroom. They can also click on a product and say 56. What times 7 is 56? And search for the 8. So they're making their link between making the link between multiplication and division. Right. We have another one here called the equivalence. Again, 3 different models they can cycle through as they wish anytime they want to find those equivalent fractions. We have another one here to support a lab activity for students figuring out what speed is. If you ask a child in grade 6 or 7 what speed is, they have a sense of it, but they can't tell you about it. They good understanding of what speed is, a relationship between distance and time. And this allows them to take recordings and discover that relationship, and then they can go through a lab of activity where they're monitoring the speed of cars as they go by, or the speed of people as they're back, or something like that. This one it's actually still in development. Base 10 blocks. Well, the base 10 blocks are great manipulatives. They're proportional manipulatives for helping make sense of the number system. And here we have we've expanded it so that you can represent 498,905,439 in these base 10 blocks, and you see these are the units, these are the thousands, and these are the millions. So they're allowed to explore them, and then they just press check, and it gives them. And this is a different example. They can check, and they're told where they've got it right. And you just switch between these different levels by double tapping on the period that's involved, and it zooms in and zooms out so that you have this relationship. And you can see, actually, when you're actually looking at it, you can actually even see the units, even when you're looking in the millions context, which is helpful, we believe. Another one, we've got a grad student working on this one, developing this idea of helping students to make sense of the distribution of dice and as they're rolled. They start by setting up a wall based on where they think the rolls will happen, and then they roll the dice over and over again to see how they just discover the nature of random numbers or random events. They can look at it in another screen. They can examine what happens if you had 1,000 rolls, what happens if you have 10,000 rolls, and they can see how it stabilizes. But with their small sets of rolls, they discover the nature of random numbers. Now, I've got one other one here, but I think we're running out of time, so I want to stop and let you ask some questions. Let me put my headphone.
All right, I've gone ahead and turned on the microphone, so if anybody wants to ask a question, feel free to ask. I'll try to repeat it. While you're thinking of those, I'm going to ask Tim, you told me when we were talking last week about what you wanted to do with the sort of the research feature on this.
Right.
On these a little bit. You want to talk about that a little bit more?
Okay, well, take my headphones off again so I can hear myself. What we're going to be doing is going into the classroom and conducting parallel research studies where they're working with one group is working with one application, another with another application. So they're both moving forward, they're both having an opportunity to learn something, but we can see their development and growth in their accuracy and their fluency with each of the topic areas. So what we hope to see is that, yes, this tool is very useful for supporting that growth and that understanding, and then we hope to go back and find, using another tool to external assessment device to confirm that it's transferred, to confirm that it's carried forward in time, so that we have validate the applications that we've created. We believe we're capturing some of the best practices that we're promoting in our classrooms, and we're hoping. One other thing, I guess, is the reporting system. See if I can show. Whenever you've got an application working with, there's a progress screen that allows you to examine what an individual has been doing over time, and it tells you the date and the time and the score and what target they were aiming for and the time that they took. Goal for that is just to report that right on the application, but they can also press report, which allows them to enter an email address and send that, and there's a research option that allows to send the more fine-grained data for analysis.
I noticed somebody started typing something earlier. Question.
The iPad, I'll talk. I'm not hearing anybody on the other side here, so I'm going to sound. The iPad will run anything that will run on an iPod Touch or iPhone. We're building our apps primarily for the iPhone and iPod Touch because we want them to be as being devices that will be in the classroom fairly commonly. The iPads as well. But we're building it at the compact size so that they can scale up. It's harder to scale down something that's iPad is something that the teacher can use as they're working with the classroom, holding it up and discussing it and asking the children to come up and engage with it. But they can also, we're hoping with the newest iPad model that's coming out, we're hoping what's going to happen is they'll have an automatic video out. There is a mechanism that you can incorporate into your program to have the video out of what's on the screen. We haven't done that yet. We were anticipating that, developing that feature, so we didn't need to. It seems especially in education, you're always wanting to share what's on the screen.
Other questions? All right. There's questions? All right.
Websites, we've got a couple thing at site again this year and at CCM, and we're hoping to actually work with publishers. Both their e-textbooks, we're hoping to have in place a collection of apps that they'll look at and say, okay, that makes sense. Those seem to be working. Sure, we'll engage with you to help us as to develop additional apps. We've got ideas for a couple hundred apps within mathematics. Sciences and social sciences. Another application we've developed, and actually we won an award for it. It's still in its infancy. Show that video to you. Maybe that'll be.
Alright, so I think he's going to show a video and then we'll probably end up here. I think the purpose of this one is to be able to see what your carbon footprint is. But it only works
So what we have here is an application where students are going to explore their use of sources, and they're going to explore their impact on the climate by examining their use of food, of electronics, of transportation, of showers, all the things that they have choices about, and they're going to see how that affects their footprint. And by entering their experiences over a week, we can annualize an estimate and come up with an estimate for their consumption or their CO2 equivalents produced for the year. And then they can look at the graph and say, oh, I can see that the transportation is a big effect here, or I can see that food is having a big effect, and I can adjust my choices so that I can have a less impact on the environment. That was that application again will be supporting the idea of using multiple labs, working with students to engage with them to topic, working together, and then they can actually share it on Facebook if they wish to help their students. Wrap up now. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to share with you. I'd encourage anybody who's interested in engaging with these apps to do so, to contact us. We're really happy to work with anybody who's wanting to go forward and do anything else with this. We're wide open on this, and so it's something that we think has great potential, and we're looking.
All right, well, I'll turn the microphone on. Everybody can clap. All right.